Welcome to Film Strip. These podcasts are spoiler-filled as we discuss the plots, characters, and themes of the films in review. All content used or discussed in these podcast episodes is the property of the respective owners and used under the Fair Use Act, Section 504, C2, Title 17.
Welcome to Film Strip. I'm Jay.
I'm Irina.
And this is our review of Wonder Woman 1984, starring Gal Gadot, Kristen Wiig, Pedro Pascal, and Chris Pine. Directed by Patty Jenkins, released in 2020 simultaneously in theaters and through HBO's online streaming platform. Hello, bonus episode to end 2020. It's Monday, and you're going, where's my New Year's Evil you've been promising me with Tis the Podcast for weeks and weeks, Jay? It's coming later this week, but we kind of skipped a week here around Christmas because we dropped all those Paranormal Activity movies earlier in December. And since this one came out on Christmas Day and it's such a unique release schedule, and because Irina is often the one to come up with, hey, we should do this, we decided, hey, why not throw a bonus out there for the fans and to talk about a movie that's very much the thing people are talking about right now, because it is the newest thing that has appeared on the release schedule right now.
Well, in fairness, we do want to mention that I can very rarely remember any movie one day after I've watched it. So we had to jump on this one when I said, hey, let's record this, because we knew I'd forget the entire thing, but we knew I had a couple of things to say about it.
True, there is a lot to say about this one, and there's certainly a lot that goes on in it, and we'll get to it. But first off, just backgrounds on the first Wonder Woman movie from 2017, or any of the DC universe and Gal Gadot's appearances throughout the Batman, Superman movies and Justice League and all that stuff.
Oh, we talking about backgrounds for when we saw it? I do have to say, her first appearance, I was kind of I didn't like the way she was introduced into the DC universe. I thought it was almost a throwaway. It wasn't like some secret, here she comes. For me, it was just like, oh, and here's Wonder Woman, big deal. That being said, I'm a Wonder Woman cosplayer, which is fun. So I appreciate her. And I think that, she's a strong character. And when they finally did release her movie, I was psyched. I loved the way everything was done in it. I loved the format. I loved the characters. I loved the story. I think I saw it in the theaters, which, that leads me to, kind of where we're going with the new way of movies being released here. I saw this in my living room. I saw Wonder Woman 84 in my living room. I don't know about you.
Yeah, no, I saw it in my living room as well. When the first Wonder Woman appearance came in, I think I had been spoiled that was going to happen in Batman versus Superman, Dawn of Justice. And I thought, like you, it was kind of they wedged that in there. I guess they're setting her up for her own thing, yada, yada. Having now, I own the director's cut of that, which is it's still about 30 minutes too long, but her appearance makes a lot more sense in it, in that version of it. And I'm one of the few people I know who didn't absolutely just hate Justice League. I thought it was fine. It wasn't great, but it was okay. And I thought she was fun in it. But I loved that first Wonder Woman movie. Saw that in theaters, have seen it at home many times. It's a big fun in our home. And my wife, who's not a big superhero movie fan, that's not really her thing, absolutely loved it and thought it was great. And, as far as Gal Gadot goes, I've been watching her since the Fast and Furious franchise when she popped up in, I think, the fifth one. There's so many, it's hard to remember anymore, but she was around for 2 or 3 of those. And I thought she was fun in that. And I when they cast her as Wonder Woman, I said, I get it. This tall, kind of exotic beauty, and she is from Israel, and she's she served in the military, and she's got all the bona fides to make it work. And inside of just being a pretty face, she is a pretty good actress too. And I thought would bring something to that with it, which was fun. I don't remember the Wonder Woman TV show. I think it was on in syndication when I was growing up. And I know I've seen it and I know who Linda Carter is and all that, but it wasn't what I knew Wonder Woman as. I knew Wonder Woman from the Justice League and Friends cartoons and kind of the ridiculousness that the character is on that. So I didn't have this great affinity for it, but I also just didn't hate it either. I thought, well, this could be fun. And Patty Jenkins hit it totally out of the park with that last movie. So they said, hey, we're bringing her back for the second one. I said, okay, cool. I'm down. And I was excited for this to come out in whatever way we could get it. And it is certainly another one of the great tests of Hollywood right now is, can you put these tentpole franchises out in 2 formats and they still make the money because it is about the money.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it really is. One of the things that I love about Gal Gadot's performance in this character is she brings such an innocence to Wonder Woman, who is this strong character who really embodies striving for the peace and love aspect of things that I don't think we get from other DC characters. I'm going to go back to, her introduction in Batman versus Superman. I mean, it was like when Marvel threw in Captain Marvel and we were supposed to go, okay, what the hell are we going to do with this? It's these very strong characters that are introduced with throwaways that are supposed to be teasers, which I don't think is fair to either of them. But the Wonder Woman franchise was my first introduction to Gal Gadot, and seeing her in that original Wonder Woman movie, it was she embodied everything about that character: the curiosity, the innocence, the naivete. It was just perfect for me and what I would imagine a Wonder Woman to be.
Yeah, that first Wonder Woman movie is very much a fish out of water story because she's from this exotic culture, very sheltered in a different time, really, who's thrust into in that setting, World War One, and all of the political upheaval that was and the change. And I personally gave that movie an extra star for that setting because I have said many times on other Film Strip episodes that World War II has been such a cinematic playground for decades for Hollywood. I almost feel like World War I gets forgotten in some things. There's some good movies to be made out of that. So to set it in that time gave it a perspective that you didn't walk in just automatically knowing like all the big hallmarks of it. And I thought that was cool.
What's interesting about World War II, as much as some generations will look at it as a sad time period, it is a very romanticized part of history. There is something absolutely wonderful about, and not wonderful, but there are stories to be told about lovers being torn apart, husbands and wives, families and everything. And I think that's why that time period is just so important for when Diana is brought in, because then she is seeing the world absolutely torn apart.
Yeah, and the settings for what will become. And I say all of that as preamble into in all the prelude up to this. I really didn't know a lot about what this movie was going to be about, other than it was going to be set in 1984. They were somehow going to bring Chris Pine back into this, who, spoiler alert, his character dies in self-sacrifice at the end of the first movie. And I was curious what that would look like, how you could do all of that, and if this movie would give into the trope of, we're going to do something in the 80s and we're going to shove all the 80s stuff we possibly can in your face and just all that iconography. And so I didn't know much of what this movie was going to be about. Other than the one thing Gal Gadot had said in interviews that I thought was cool was that, well, in the first movie, if Diana is naive and inexperienced in the modern world and she's the fish out of water, in this movie, she's no longer that. She's kind of world weary, and she's been around, and she's a little, isolated, and she's experienced, and that's a different character to play. And something you told me that I thought was so fascinating when you had already seen this before I did was that you don't feel like you got to go back and watch that first movie. This one really, even though it's called a sequel, it's really just the next adventure of Wonder Woman. It doesn't have to rely on everything from the previous one. And while I think the Steve character is the one piece you probably need to at least be aware of, you're absolutely right. I didn't feel like I missed anything by not rewatching Wonder Woman before watching Wonder Woman 1984.
Yeah, I mean, the beauty of it is that she meets new people and basically retells the story. So it is just another chapter. So for me, this movie, I had some expectation, and here's why. It was filmed near me. It was filmed. There was the mall scene in this. Spoiler alert: they're in a mall. It was filmed at basically an abandoned mall here in Virginia, and I submitted to be an extra for this show. I didn't get selected, or for this movie, pardon me. I didn't get selected, but I totally knew it was happening. It was a couple years ago. I submitted everything, my headshot and everything. And all I can say is maybe I just look too much like Gal Gadot to have been an extra in the movie. But, you know, I kind of had some idea of where some of the filming was going to be. So I knew some of the background. But, and as I said to you, it really, it was such a standalone. Like, I watched it and I felt like they were two separate movies that kind of were the same thing. Like, they could have chosen somebody else to play Diana in this movie and we still would have gotten the story across without any gaps.
Yeah, and I think that's a smart move on the DC Warner Brothers movie parts, is to, instead of being such a interconnected cinematic universe like Marvel has, is it's going to be one where they all sort of exist in the same area, but you don't have to watch movie to movie to movie for these things to exist on their own and to have their own arcs and stories. And part of that is because all the other times we've seen Diana, minus the first Wonder Woman movie, have been, you know, today, present day or whatever, and we're telling her story in flashbacks, which I think is kind of a neat idea. You know, she lives. I mean, obviously she's going to live. You can't destroy her, but how do you tell her arc and where we see her in Batman versus Superman and Justice League and all those things? How do you get her to that point? What are the things she's experienced to get there? That was a cool idea. And, you know, right now we are in a heyday of romanticizing the 1980s. You talk about romanticizing time periods. I mean, I call it the Stranger Things effect. Everything has to be about that time. And, you know, as a kid who grew up during that time, no complaints. I'm down if it's done right. And that we can get into that as we get into the movie here. But I do think that the premise and the idea and the setup for this are cool from the outset. And I was game. Again, I was game to go back and see this and see where they could take this character. It's been the most successful thing the DC universe has done. And it's a good launching point for where they're going to go next, because, you know, we've got in 2021 the Zack Snyder 4-hour miniseries, I guess it is now, of Justice League. We'll see what that turns out to be. If it can be, you know, an improvement on the movie, which again I didn't hate, but a lot of people do. And then where they can go, you know, with all those characters. We've got the Batman filming, which is kind of a prequel to other stuff. I don't know. The DC universe is much more convoluted and, I dare say, shaped by negative fan reaction than the Marvel one was, which has been sort of universally loved and has carried on for 20-something movies now.
The things that Marvel has that DC doesn't have is the sense of camaraderie and family and teamwork. And, you know, I don't know how DC can come up with that. I don't think they can, especially after they just visited the 80s with this movie. And there was no Superman. So for me, like, I go back to Christopher Reeves and he is the only Superman in my mind. I'm sorry to Henry Cavill and any other person who has played that part. He is the only Superman. And they did such a good job with harkening back to the 80s with this particular movie that I was waiting for Superman to come in and help her out. I was waiting for Clark to show up at least in a cameo, and we didn't get him at all.
and in the DC cinematic universe, it's fair to say, though, Superman doesn't come around until the 2000s.
Right.
In the way that they've reset the timeline, which is kind of neat.
It is kind of neat. I disagree with it. I think they dropped the ball on that, but that's fine. So we'll dissect this movie instead of going back to what I wish they had done.
Indeed. So let's give a little plot summary. Spoilers hot, obviously. If you haven't seen Wonder Woman 1984, you plan to, but want to stop the podcast now and come back later. Otherwise, we're going to tell you basically what happens in this movie, and then we can get into the different pieces. Diana Prince lives her double life performing heroic acts as Wonder Woman while leading an anthropology unit at the Smithsonian Institute. There she befriends an intelligent yet awkward woman named Barbara, and both bond over a seemingly worthless object inscribed with a Latin phrase claiming to grant wishes. Diana secretly wishes, of course, that Steve Trevor would come back to her, and when he does, inhabiting the soul of another man's body, she is taken aback but also swept up in the pangs of love lost that has returned. This object turns out to be a magical dreamstone, though, created by a god of mischief, which not only grants wishes, but, of course, they come with a great price. Essentially, what you wish for costs you the thing that means the most to you, or is most important to you. The world is thrown into chaos when a scheming businessman named Maximilian Lord steals it, And Lord wishes to become the very embodiment of the Dreamstone and becomes a powerful, successful kind of genie thing. And a lot of trouble comes in the wake of madness as he fulfills wishes and then takes a power and power on. Diana realizes Steve came back through the stone's power, but it is also draining her power from her. Meanwhile, Barbara, who wished to become more like Diana, not realizing what all that means, loses her friendliness and her charm and grows physically powerful. Lord eventually uses his wishes to gain an audience with the President of the United States, from whom he gains the ability to use their satellite communication systems in order to grant wishes into the whole world, kind of like a televangelist, sort of. And when Diana tries to stop him, the powered-up Barbara defeats her in a fight and frees Max, vowing to destroy anyone who gets in his way. Steve convinces Diana to renounce her wish, the only way to undo the cost of the wish fulfillment, letting him go and returning her powers, along with the new ability to fly. Diana dons the armor of the legendary Amazon warrior Asteria and goes to confront Lord and Barbara as they broadcast their message from a secret military satellite base on an island somewhere. Barbara, who has now wished to become an apex predator, kind of like a cheetah, and Diana fight, with Diana eventually winning, but not killing Barbara. Diana uses her lasso of truth to wrangle Max and to communicate with the world through him, convincing everyone to renounce their wishes and to set things back in order. With the world returned to its order in 1984, Diana goes back to her life, resolved to continue protecting it as credits roll. And in a mid-credits stinger, we learned that Asteria is living amongst us as well, as Linda Carter saves a child from a falling beam or something and turns around and winks to the audience, and then credits ultimately roll. And that's the sum total of Wonder Woman 1984. For a movie that's 2.5 hours long, I will praise this film for keeping the plot very simple and not having too many twists and turns, too many people to follow. We really have Diana, for a little bit Steve, but Barbara and Maximilian Lord are the people we're going to spend time with in this universe.
I think the benefit of the 2.5 hours is that we have two movies when we watch this. We have an hour and 15-minute movie, and then we have another hour and 15-minute movie. It's like we take the old Superman and throw Diana there, and then we suddenly split off, and we are met with like the Dark Knight or something. But
I called it, Irina. I called it. We have Wonder Woman, the romantic drama, and then we have Wonder Woman 2 in the second half of it.
It was really like watching like Days of Our Lives or something, and then going and watching some other modern superhero television show.
Yeah,
and I had to laugh because our actress who plays Barbara, Kristen Wiig, I never would have pictured her in a part like this. Not after watching her in Bridesmaids. Never would I have seen her in this type of serious role, and I've got to give her credit. She pulled it off. She was great.
Yeah, can I tell you why I actually bought it when I found out what the role was? When they first announced her, I was like, sure. I didn't think anything about it. And then when I saw what the role was throughout watching the movie, I was like, Kristen Wiig has made a career out of being the put-upon friend that has prettier other people around her, and she wishes she could be them. And there's always horrendous results when that happens. And she can play the comedy. She can kind of own the room. But when you doll her up, she can be very alluring as well. And the physicality, whatever, it's all CGI anyway. So I didn't care. I didn't think she needed to be Gal Gadot, to be able to pull off all that stuff, because they didn't really ask her to do a whole ton of it, I don't think. I mean, more just stand there and let your face be morphed on the little computer cheetah we're throwing around the screen. But I thought as a character, she was fun, and she's just playing the same thing she's played on Saturday Night Live for years.
Yeah, I mean, it is a character actress part. She really does get sucked right into that. And as an actor, I feel bad for her that she has this character type, but it really worked for this, especially when we watch her transformation from the put upon. I'm not going to say put upon. Can we call her weak?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I was trying to be nice, but you're right. She is a total weakling. Yeah.
She's a little weakling and didn't have to be, but that was kind of where she settled. But to go from this weak little nobody to somebody who is strong and commanding, it really was a good transformation for her, even though she didn't even really change the character much, but it was the blocking and the actors around her that changed their approach to her.
Yeah, I think the thing you figure out about Barbara, and what I liked about it, was she's still as smart as she was in the beginning after she becomes alluring, if you will, and becomes the attention getter that she always wanted to be. So,
to a point.
Well, I think she still uses her brain to do stuff. She ultimately gives into the sin of, you get what you ask for in the wish fulfillment. And we can get into that later. But I appreciated the fact that she didn't need to wish to become smarter. She was already intelligent. She was already smart. She was mousy. She was, she'd been picked on her whole life. You could tell she'd been ignored. She talks about how, people think I don't hear them talking behind my back, but like, hello, right over here. I hear you all the time. And like, she knows she's the nerd, as it were. And she does the 80s, and really it's a 90s trope of take the glasses off the nerd girl and put her in some tight clothes. And oh my goodness, she's a model and all that stuff. I thought that was fine. What I'm more interested in is how Diana Prince is in 1984. She's a little more world weary. She's still doing good things, but you can tell she sits alone at a restaurant, and they have that whole bit where she's sitting there waiting to order, and the guy's like, "Are you waiting for anybody?" And they pick up her stuff, and she goes. When she goes to the big party, every guy in the room hits on her, and she just blows them off because she's still missing Steve. I mean, she keeps his watch on her counter by a picture of him. I mean, that's something 70 years later she's still not gotten over.
Well, and you mentioned the party where she's turning heads and she's kind of blowing everybody off. She even blows off Steve because here he is in another man's body.
Right.
And, them coming together is beautiful in an adorable, innocent kind of way. I love the way that Chris Pine plays this part. And now, if anybody doesn't know, Christopher Pine is my hall pass. He and Bruce Willis are my hall passes. And there's something about Christopher Pine that is just so easy. He makes his acting is effortless. You believe him. I haven't seen anything that I did not believe that he was that cowboy type. Maybe it's, it's another typecasting because, he was Captain Kirk. So, we get that same kind of vibe from him. Something that they changed in the interaction between Steve and Diana for this movie is her sense of humor, and they've given her a little bit more youthful, relaxed edge to her when it's just the two of them alone.
Yeah, they have a good time. And what's funny is Steve gets to be the fish out of water now because he's 1985, and they do a great camera trick. It's actually the guy who's credited as handsome man the whole time, but all she sees is Steve and him. So we get to see Chris Pine try on like 80s clothes, and he puts on a Thriller outfit, which that wouldn't have made any sense in 1984 because those weren't really available till after that. But whatever, like we do all that. He's got the fanny pack, which is a running joke throughout the thing, and that he dresses up in all this ridiculous garb. And what I will credit this movie for is like, okay, here's all your 80s stuff that, you need to know that this is 1980s. And now we're not going to beat you over the head with it anymore. And yeah. I really, really appreciated that because I felt like if this movie turns into The Wedding Singer, I'm going to get real mad because there's things about that work. And there's parts of that it's like doing greatest hits albums. They're out of time and out of place and they don't make sense. And I appreciated the humor of this, that Diana got to be the one on the other foot this time to sort of show him how the world works now. And the whole bit with the airplanes and the space museum and, how that would have blown his mind from, 1915 till now. It's pretty cool. It was fun. And Chris Pine, I can take him or leave him, Irina. I'll be honest with you. I think he's great as Kirk. I think he was horrible as Jack Ryan the one time they tried to do that with him. But I've seen him in other stuff where I think he is good. And what's best about him in these two movies is he doesn't have to carry it. He's the side thing. And that is fun to watch. And to watch those two together, they clearly have a lot of fun with it. So it was fun. It was fun to see Steve back in there. And again, credit for using 80s iconography, but not beating us over the head with it, and for learning how to work the comedy and a reverse role this time.
Right. And I mean, he is a character actor. We won't gloss over that. That's what Chris Pine is. That's why I love him. I did feel, even though they utilized Steve coming back, mind you, the camera trick was perfect. And my husband kept looking at me. He was like, what's going on? I said, wait for it. Wait for it. Because I could see it coming because of my theater eye. I could see what was about to happen. And I was thrilled that it happened. But the unfortunate thing here is Steve in this movie you didn't need him there to have a good movie. We could have done without it. And there could have been some other wish that Diana had. Maybe Diana wished to be an average person or something instead of being Wonder Woman. Maybe she wished that she didn't live forever. And we still could have had the Barbara Apex Predator storyline. That's why I said it's two separate movies.
Well, what they're doing in the first part of this movie is the Richard Donner Superman 2 thing. Where Superman's one wish is to be with the love of his life, so he gives away the thing that means the most to him. The difference is in this movie, Diana doesn't realize it's going to cost her powers. And it never really totally takes her powers away. We should say it just like dials them back from 10 to about 6.5, maybe 6 at some point. But for Superman, he gives up his power. He gets beat up in a roadside restaurant. Things go bad. And what does he do? He crawls back to the Fortress of Solitude and gets him back and saves the world. He basically gives up Lois to save the world. And she's asked to do the same thing here. I would say the other thing, too, that kind of surprised me, not that it doesn't make any sense, because, again, I'm talking about a comic book movie, that this guy would have any knowledge of modern avionics when they jump in an F-18 together to take off. Like, he would have no idea what any of that was. That's not how the deck of that looks. He wouldn't know how to fly it. I don't know if that's the right plane or not, but whatever. He wouldn't know how to do that. Like, it's almost weird that, like, she needs a chauffeur because he drives the car at one point and all this. I'm like, why does a Wonder Woman need an escort? I mean, I know he's the love of her life, so if I give it that conceit, I go with it. But if to acknowledge what you're saying and to say I agree with you too, if you take Steve out of this movie, you could have had something else and it just went in the same place. And I think you hit on it. What if she said, I just want to be a normal person and I don't want to have all of the weight of having to be this superhero in disguise anymore? That would have worked too. That because we should talk about the opening of this movie is I guess it's Amazonian Olympics or something. I don't know.
Right.
Maybe the Amazonian World Games, whatever. But
which was another movie by itself too.
Well, it's almost like that's the teaser we would have stuck on another movie had we had any to release this year. Sorry, kids, here it is.
Yeah, I mean that could have gone in the first Wonder Woman movie, but
right. So we got the same little girl back that's playing her again as young Diana, and she's going through this ridiculous competition with the other Amazonians, and she's the only little kid there. It would be like putting a 9-year-old up against all these grown athletes in the Olympics. Like they can hang for maybe a little bit if they're super talented, but probably not long.
It's almost like American Ninja Warrior, really.
A little bit. Yeah, it is a little bit of that. She falls over her horse. She takes a shortcut, yada, yada. At the end, she's getting ready to throw her spear through the final hoop because that's how you win. And nope, we get intervention. Like, nope, you can't cheat to win. And I'm like, here's the Saturday morning cartoon lesson of the week for this movie is that there's no shortcut to fulfilling your true greatness, and you can't cheat to win. And self-sacrifice is really the greatest gift. They're just kind of all mashed together. We get the self-sacrifice story later with Asteria and all that. But the lesson of this movie that echoes throughout the plot is that there's no shortcut to being on top. Mm-hmm. And that is a good transition into our villain of the film, if we want to call him that. Pedro Pascal in a horrible wig, chewing up.
Is it a wig or a toupee? I can't tell. It's awful.
It looks like I took my niece's hair and just flopped it over on my head. I don't know what he's got going on in that. Part Gordon Gekko, part whatever Matthew, whatever that guy's name is, that's all about free money from the government and wears the Riddler suit. Televangelist, infomercial specialist, Maximilian Lord, total con man is what he is. He's supposed to be a match of Gordon Gekko with Lex Luthor, but he's really neither. And I like Pedro Pascal. I think in the right stuff, he's really good. My rule with him is always the less is more approach. In this movie, it's more is more. They shove him through this plot, and he plays such a ham the whole time, I had a hard time really getting behind him as the villain of the movie.
He was trying to be Gene Hackman's Lex Luthor, and it just didn't work. And I'm going to actually go back to something that we were talking about when we were talking about the way that this story arc goes. In Diana losing her powers because Steve was there, I had a hard time determining whether she was losing her power because Steve was there or because Barbara was taking her power from her. So the entire movie could have been completely different. But either way, yeah, we see this poor little girl. Oh no, isn't it so sad that she didn't get to win? And my daughter's going, "That's not fair." And I looked at her and I was like, it absolutely is, because she missed hitting that one arrow, so her flag didn't go up or down or whatever way the banner was going. And, I loved the fact that she was stopped. I liked that even though we knew Diana could absolutely 100% take on all of these women, the lesson, again, was, there's no shortcuts, but also earning that sense of self-worth. Whereas this, the warrior who ends up winning these, the Olympic Games, so to speak, she's fought for everybody. She has put her time in. And I mean, it's just like, if you go to interview for a step up in your employment and then some kid who's been doing it for 5 years gets, the job that's, you don't have the experience in that position, blah, 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 blah. But, I did appreciate showing that Diana was still growing. But again, it's like there are 3 chapters to this movie.
Yeah, but that first one, though, does lead us into the biggest problem that Max Lord has the whole time, is he's trying to find a quick way to the top. And he's basically sort of bounced around and built Ponzi scheme after Ponzi scheme that have blown up in his face. His wife has left him. He, has shared custody with his son, who he wants more than anything to, fulfill all this, greatness that I tell you I am, son, and he wants his son to be proud of him. And in the end of it, I mean, the kid tells him the sweetest thing ever. It's like, you don't have to try to be proud of you. You're my dad, yada, yada, which is, again, a little hammy. But the problem that I guess if there's a problem with it, I have, is this movie wants to have it both ways. They want to have this kind of super serious DC thing, which is, it's a much darker cinematic universe than the Marvel ones. And that's fine. That differentiates it. But it also wants to have the Saturday morning 22-minute lesson of the week to put in. And I don't know that those totally work, because what it means is that your villain here doesn't have any depth to him. You mentioned Gene Hackman's Lex Luthor. We had 2 movies to really get to watch him, and really that first Superman movie, you get a lot of Lex Luthor to get what he's about. I didn't know who this dude was other than the goofy infomercial and the used car salesman act he was putting on, and you can tell you immediately, like, oh, this guy's trouble. This is going to be a problem, and it factor in that cheesy thing Pedro Pascal is doing. It just doesn't entirely work.
Well, I think one of the things that DC tries to do without fail through every storyline is they always have a male and a female working together as their villains. Even as far back as, we go back to Keaton's first Batman. We have the Joker and his girlfriend whose face he's ruined. Then, we go to the next movie. We have the Penguin and Catwoman. And, they try to do this and it doesn't always work. I think this is a situation where it didn't work. We didn't need Max to become the genie out of the lamp because Barbara already had the stone. All of this whole story could have happened just between Barbara and Diana, and it would have been nice and short and sweet. It would have been a fabulous movie. We didn't need Steve. We didn't need Max. We didn't need anybody. We just had those 2 going head to head, and it would have been great. Not that I'm saying this movie is bad, because we see the change in the characters, and mostly Barbara, and Max is he's just a tie-in. I do like the father-son lesson. I did not feel that he loved his son at all. I felt like that was completely missing. It was just another throwaway aspect to this. And can we please just touch on Asteria? Because I'll tell you what, if she has this damn armor from Asteria, where the hell was that in friggin' Justice League and where was it?
yeah, I have the same question. I was like, when she drops the wings at one point because they kind of get busted up a little bit or whatever. But I'm like, that might have been useful the last time we saw you when it was more modern times.
Right. But so let's get into this. Get into this. So the story of Asteria is that she's a great warrior and that everybody sacrificed all of their armor to make this one big gold armor suit. What? Don't ask me. To defeat all of their enemies and keep them safe. So it's still like she has this suit of armor. I don't know how it got here from, the Amazonian world, because I don't remember when she goes back, but now it's here. And she's got it, in her, is it in her apartment or
it's in her apartment, like in her little secret video layer where she's got a bunch of VHS machines.
Right. Where she's already said that she has no TVs in her apartment, but then we see she's got 12.
Right. Yeah.
So she's just got it stored away there. And I don't feel like we had enough of a buildup or enough of a background story to where this came from.
Yeah, there's the whole bit she drops about how we all combined together to give her this armor so she could defeat the enemies. And what she realized was the way I can defeat them is to self-sacrifice and basically let them collapse on me. It blows them all up at the same time. And I give my life for y'all. So they've kept the armor as sort of a testament to the great sacrifice of her, which is completely undone in the stinger at the end. Like, no, she pretty much just what she gave up was, I can't live here with y'all anymore. So that's cool. I'll go hang out in, Southampton and just walk around looking beautiful and dashing for hundreds of years.
I'll tell you what, though. Now I want an Asteria movie. Like, more than anything, I want an Asteria backstory.
I don't know that Linda's up for that, but
I don't think she is. Yeah. It would be wonderful. In my heart of hearts, that's what I want. But I also want Michael Keaton to go back to playing Batman. So,
it's. I mean, they talk about wish fulfillment. Be careful,
right?
What you get. Yeah, I want to get into what they set all of this together for. And you hit on something, Irina. I thought it was great. You could take out Max Lord and you could take Steve out of this movie. You can still leave the little watch and the picture on the mantle, and that it says all you need to say. And you could have it be about these two women. You could have it about Barbara going, I wish I was her. And when she realizes what that means, she's like, holy cow, give me more of that. And then she could become the Dreamstone embodiment and that whole nine. You could do all of that with her. And for Diana's, thing to have been like, I wish I could be, more like you. Like if they had said that to each other in a thing, like, they have this whole back and forth where they go to lunch or whatever. And Barbara goes like, I can't believe you don't have people following around you at all times. And she's like, no, I'd much rather just do, my work, kind of like what you're all about. If they had done a Flip on the Body Swap, a movie of the 1980s, by the way, which was another trope, you could have had the same things go down. The whole thing, you could have Barbara doing the whole currying favor with all these world powers, all that stuff to get the message out, to give people, I'm going to give the little people what they want. And you see how it backfired on them, and you do all of it the same way, and you still have a movie. You probably have a movie that's about 20 minutes shorter, and you have two characters we didn't need again. And I like that rewrite. I really do. I think it makes a sleeker story and a much more interesting one, because why you gotta have these dudes doing all this stuff when you got these two really good female characters?
Well, because they did not want to have Wonder Woman, Winter Soldier. Because if you take out Steve and you take out Max, you have the second Captain America movie.
Wow. Good call.
With like Captain America has Agent Carter's picture. That is, the reflection of the watch. And literally you take it apart, you get rid of all of that, and you have almost the same type of story that you had in Winter Soldier. So, and I mean, that was just me listening to you go through this. I was like, oh, that's what this is. That's why we had to play with all of that.
So instead, we have to have Superman 2 and, While You Were Sleeping and all this other stuff thrown in here to make it work. I hear you. I think there's I guess it's the problem you chase when you make these kind of movies is how do we not tell the same story? And the problem is that the formula is the formula, kids. Like it just is what it is. It's you want to go back to the 80s. I love 80s hair metal. No apologies whatsoever. But I'm not going to sit here and tell you that a whole lot of it didn't sound like each other. You could put on Warrant and Poison and Trickster back to back to back. And if I, wasn't paying attention, I couldn't tell you who was what because it all sounds the same at some point. It all gets built the same way. It all got produced by the same guys. It all got written by the same people, even though who's their name on it, that doesn't really what happened. It becomes a formula, and
we still love it.
Yeah, we still like it because there's enough of a differentiation in it to make it work. But the formula is the formula. So in some ways, like they're chasing the impossible dream to just keep telling these stories without repeating that. But I had never thought about the Winter Soldier connection. But you're right. I just laid out Captain America: Winter Soldier, which is a movie I really like. By the way,
right? So you literally get that, but you also then get you get another Batman movie complete with Catwoman.
You do, yeah, because Maximilian Lord is a whole lot like whatever Christopher Walken was doing as Max Schreck in Batman Returns. Like it's a lot of the same thing. The power hungry, rich industrialist, which is another Lex Luthor riff, gone wrong. And you also get but here's the thing about this one that I do think is different is Diana is not here to kill these people or destroy them, which is usually the thing in a superhero movie. You got to blow up the thing that is, become evil or whatever. She's really just to set them back on their normal path. She eventually gets Barbara to recant her position. She gets Max to realize you should just worry about being a good father and not trying to be Donald Trump successful, and maybe life would be better for you. That's kind of what she embodies in this. And while that seems almost reductive or simple, it works well enough. I just don't know that I needed everything that happens to happen to get us to that end point. Does that make sense?
No, yeah, it does make sense. We didn't need all that to happen. And I mean, when it breaks down to it, I'm just going to say it. Wonder Woman, Captain America should get married and live forever and have, a beautiful life together.
Captain America already ran off in an alternate timeline with Peggy, as we know.
Right, which was, that's a whole other thing. We have some great fight scenes here. I do appreciate that. Well, but before Barbara becomes our apex predator, we have we have Diana and Barbara with their fight simultaneously while Steve is beating the crap out of Max, who he's handcuffed himself to. Crack me up. And I'll never understand that, but that's fine. We have these simultaneous fights. And I love Chris Pine for his fighting is the goofiest thing in the entire world. And I think it might even be... I've never seen a real brawl in person, but I think that might actually be what it is if you're trying to defend somebody. And because he's not angry, it's not angry fighting. It's just, all right, we got to kick his butt. So I appreciate all that. I wish to kind of bring this together. So the way that Max gets the stone is he basically seduces Barbara and then steals it from her office. I wish we had a little of that come back because it would have given us more humanity between Barbara and Max. Since they kept it all in the movie, they may as well have given us that one romantic villain kiss and, moved on. They aren't a team like other DC couples are, in the sense of the DC couple. So, we have these great fight scenes, even when Barbara turns into the apex predator. And then we have the underwater fight. And I really want to know what your opinion is on how all of a sudden nothing else hurts anybody during this fight, but lightning does. All of a sudden we get Barbara electrocuted underwater as the apex predator, and Wonder Woman feels nothing. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, wouldn't that metal have been conductive a little bit more than the cheetah in the water? I don't know. By the time we got to that end fight, I'll be honest with you, Irina, I was like, I know she's going to win. Let's just get it over with. And thankfully, they didn't stretch it out too long. The problem in some of these movies is that the fights just go on forever and ever, particularly the DC Universe movies like Man of Steel and Dawn of Justice, and all that just goes on way too long to get to the end. So I'll give it credit for the brevity. It was fun enough of an answer to get to the point, because again, she's basically trying to get Barbara to recant her position. She's reasoning with her, and then she finally says she's sorry. I thought, is Wonder Woman about to kill this woman? Because that would be a new twist. And when she doesn't, I thought, oh, so basically you just electrocuted the kitty in the bathtub and then laid it on the counter.
And she didn't even end up with any fried fur. Like if I put one of my cats in the tub with an electrocutor, my cat would be like, poof.
I know, right?
Hair everywhere.
It was very strange. I also didn't totally love how Barbara became the cheetah. When she's doing the whole kind of punk rocker thing when they're fighting in the White House or whatever that was. I kind of bought that. I sort of liked it. I'm like, if that's what they do with the cheetah thing, I'm down because I think that would be cool. When she gets on the plane with Max, and we should say he like is falling apart this whole time as wishes are granted, and he takes stuff like his eyes are bleeding and all this other mess. And you kind of realize like he's basically turning into stone is the idea. And so he has to like steal people's organs magically to live. It's really ham-fisted how they throw that in there, but it was there. He basically says to her like, oh, you made a wish too, but don't you want another one? And my question was like, well, obviously she wished to become the cheetah. What did she give up for that? Because she didn't have anything else left to give. She gave up her friendliness, which is kind of okay, to be a more assertive woman. That might be the wrong lesson to take from this.
See, I saw it a little bit differently. I did not take it that what was taken away from her or what she gave up was her friendliness. I felt she gave away and gave up her intellect. She's still a problem solver, but in a predatory sense. She still has that intelligence that came with Barbara, but what she loses is, and maybe we should say it's her heart.
It's her empathy, right?
Yep. She loses her heart. She loses judging right from wrong. And she gains this narcissistic approach rather than, who she was, which was she would do anything for anybody. And she was this sweet, lovable character that was kind of a geek. When Diana recognizes that the resolution to the problem is to renounce her wish, and she doesn't come to the conclusion on her own. Steve has to tell her. And we have this beautiful moment in the middle of a fight because basically the whole world is, broken down because everybody's fighting with everybody. Max is able to broadcast to the entire world via satellite, just make your wish and I'll make it come true. So everybody's wished for things. We've got this guy who wished for a farm and now he's got cows in the middle of the city. And we have all these people who have wished for different things, and Steve and Barbara are realizing what's happened, and we have a beautiful romantic acting moment. It is the most intimate moment in the entire movie where we see Diana break down, and Gal Gadot and Christopher Pine opposite each other in this 30 or 45 second moment is absolutely beautiful in the realization of we have to say goodbye again. And all she can say is, I don't want to say goodbye.
I'll say this about that. I agree with you. It's a beautiful moment. I wish it had taken a little bit more because he starts that conversation with her earlier and she's like, I don't want to hear this. I don't want to hear this. And so when it comes back up, it makes sense. But I wish it had lasted a little bit longer to give that more weight. Because you're right. It is happening in the middle of the all hell breaking loose outside.
Right.
And it gets kind of thrown away. They play with it a little bit when she starts lassoing lightning bolts, which you've seen her do before. It's kind of cool. And she catches onto an airplane so she can be in the sky. And she realizes, holy cow, I can fly. And it's like his voice in the background going like, flying's not that big a deal.
This is my super empathetic and romanticized look at everything and just because I like to see things through that scope, in this moment, she's given up Steve again. So wouldn't it be nice if she got something back?
It's kind of neat, yeah.
But her place with Steve and the love and keeping his idea and who he is alive, it is that ability to fly. So that is part of Steve that she's taken into herself. And, if we go back to the comic books, didn't Wonder Woman fly?
She had
wasn't
a jet.
That a thing?
She has an invisible jet, which they play with here because as they're trying to take off from the
right.
aviation museum or whatever, the cops are all after them, guards, whatever. She does this whole, my dad, taught me how to disappear stuff. I lost a coffee cup doing this once. And I'm like, that's funny. And then she, lays hands on the plane and it's invisible, which they don't really play with anymore. I guess that was a callback to, hey, remember the invisible jet? Here's how that would work if we were being serious about it. Because that was always the joke in the cartoon is like, you would see this little woman flying around, holding like this control stick, and it didn't make any sense.
Yeah, sure. I love that at that moment, we're in the 4th of July.
Yeah.
And at the end of the movie, it's Christmas because it starts friggin' snowing.
Right. Well,
so
there's been some
I'm
time
really...
passed since the televangelism moment, and we'll get to in a sec. But you're right.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, but overall, I had fun watching it. Was it worth 2.5 hours? No, but Endgame wasn't worth almost 4 hours of my life either.
Before we get to that thought, though, I do want to talk about how it goes down at the end, because as we talked about, Max gets to the secret base of telecommunications heaven or whatever. And I want to ask you, what exactly is causing the whirlwind that is blowing around the studio in him? Because it almost feels like a little bit of Batman Forever and the Riddler's, brain sucker thing going on.
100%.
And I was like, well, I don't understand why everyone's wishes coming in at, fast thought would cause a mighty wind to go down in the studio. It's a little odd.
Yeah, you know what? I have no answer. I think one of the ways of showing turmoil in cinema is wind. Wind is one of those things. We can't control it. We can't stop it. We can't hide from it. You can put an umbrella up and hide from the rain. But if you have wind and you have an umbrella, you're going to get blown away.
I guess so. It just comes out of nowhere. But again, I don't mind it because I like the fact that Diana defeats him not by beating him down, but she lassos him around the leg, and she tells, because he's telling her, like, you can have your pilot back. All you got to do is just join my side and all this. And she basically tells the world through him, folks, what you're doing is causing all of this madness. If you'll just say you want out, you can turn it all back. And that was a neat trick. She tricked him into relinquishing the power by also showing him you had a really lousy childhood. You're now visiting that upon your son. Do you want that for him? Yeah, and that appeals to his humanity.
My problem with the end of this movie is there is nowhere that he says, I renounce my wish. I hate what I've become. And I don't feel like the message was conveyed to, everybody else who was listening to him to renounce their wish and have everything go back to normal.
I mean, you do get that montage, though, where people are saying, like, oh, I wish that back. I reverse that. I take it back. They all do a take back. And I think at some point he says it. But you're right. It just gets flashed across in a montage rather than being something that has repercussions.
I felt that the script writers could have given us a little bit more. I didn't feel like it was an acting problem or a cinematography problem. I felt it was right there in the script or in between the lines of the script, and it was never said.
To be fair, it's nowhere near as dumb as just have Superman fly backwards around the world a couple hundred times too. Twice. Because he did that twice in the script.
No. I will take Superman flying backwards around the world and changing the Earth's rotation any day over this that did not have any clear, concise resolution.
And we do get, though, the tactone coda. You're right. It's Christmas time. She's walking across. There's kids playing. It's snowing. And the man who Steve had inhabited basically walks out. They do kind of a meet cute bump into each other. And he's got on one of the ridiculous outfits Steve tried to go. And she's like, you know what? It works for you. It looks good. And he's like, oh, thanks. You made my day. I'll see you. And she kind of grins. And I'm like, now we've had the rom-com ending too.
Well, we had the rom-com ending, but one of the things, because you know me, and I always look at costuming and the way that it's done, because that's where my brain is at. The outfit that this man shows up wearing is the outfit that Diana picked for Steve.
True. Fair enough.
So all of a sudden we have this little flicker of Steve and his memory still left in this body, which unfortunately gives us a third movie. If they want to go there, I hope they don't. I hope somebody listens to this podcast and says, okay, no, we're not going to go there. But, it makes you wonder, okay, is she going to find him again? Is this going to be like the you've got mail bump into each other everywhere type of thing? And then they have a happy ending. But I loved that moment. I cried twice during this movie. Once when Steve and Diana said goodbye to each other, and you hear him say, I love you. Okay, 3 times. When we see him the first time, when we see him when she says goodbye to him, and then this moment where they gave us that little bit of resolution, and maybe there's this hope that Diana is going to find true love down the road.
But we know she doesn't because she's not with anybody in the newer movies. So maybe what she does and what she is resolved to have is that I can love again if I want to, where she has just shut that off from herself for, decades now. Maybe that's what the resolution was. I would have liked to know what happens to Barbara. She turns back into a semi-normal looking person. So she obviously recants her wish. Does she go back to work at the Smithsonian? Does Diana, for that matter? Does it matter? I guess not. There are a lot of unresolved questions, and I guess that's what Wonder Woman 3 is for, if and when we ever get to that point. Irina, we're at the part of the podcast where it's time to give final thoughts, recommendations, and popcorn ratings. So what are yours for Wonder Woman 1984?
So for this one, if you haven't seen the original Wonder Woman, watch this one first. I actually would watch this one first and then watch the first movie. I feel like they're better viewed in that order. I feel like the depth of the characters is better viewed in that order because there's such a deep, there's more of that deep ending to the movie. And I think the progression would work better watching this one and then watching the original Wonder Woman. I'd watch it. I probably will watch it several more times just to see what else I can find in it because I like finding little details. I'm going to give it a medium popcorn with, some cinnamon sugar on it because it was sweet. It's not medium popcorn. You know me giving a medium popcorn. That's like everybody else giving an extra large because I'm super stingy. But yeah, Jay, what are your thoughts on this?
I mean, I thought for what it was trying to do, they did a good job of overall pulling together the movie. I think you and I've talked about things that could have been differently and you arrive at the same outcome. It would have been a lot shorter film, and you don't make a $200 million movie and not have it be 2 hours plus these days. It's just how it's done. Mm-hmm. All that said, I liked it. I didn't like it as much as the first one. It's not as fun to watch world weary Wonder Woman, I guess I would say. And you can tell, though, she's come full circle because the way she portrays the character in Dawn of Justice and Justice League and stuff, she's sort of lived through all this stuff. So maybe it unveils a little bit more of that for you. I think the first movie is more fun, but I think first movies can be more fun because it's just introducing everything. The villains in this are weak. Their motivation is incredibly cheesy. But I'll give the movie points back again for not bathing in the 80s iconography to the point that it just becomes parody and becomes an SNL skit or Wedding Singer-ish or something like that. And there's a time and place for those, but I don't really think this movie was it. I thought Gal Gadot is good in it. I thought Chris Pine was fun in it. Pedro Pascal's not great in it, but that's not entirely his fault. The character's terrible. Kristen Wiig always does the best with what she's given, and I thought she made the most of it. Was fun. If we were in normal times and I was trying to tell people, like, is this worth going to see in theaters or do you just need the HBO subscription or whatever? I'd be like, go see this in a theater. I think this would look awesome on a big screen. It'd probably be a lot of fun, but we don't live in those times. So if you're watching it at home like we did, good. I think it's definitely worth a rewatch. It's one I'll watch again at some point, but I like the first one better. I'll say that. That said, I'm not going to completely give it the medium popcorn because more or less this movie did it did what it set out to do in terms of telling its story and hitting its beat from 1 to 2 to 3. So for that and for the competent direction and all of that, I'll give it a large, and it's a slight large. It'd be like the matinee large. Like you get it next day, but it's still fresh enough you like it. It's pretty good. I'll tell you one thing. We didn't even talk about it, Irina. The score in this is completely, totally invisible. Like I didn't know this was Hans Zimmer until I looked it up. Like you'd never know that.
No, I didn't know either.
And I think that's one thing about the behind the scenes of this that I'm fascinated with is that the only thing back are the actors and the director. The production team's different. The writers are different. The cinematographer is different. The editor's different. The composer's different. They just swatched out all the pieces but brought some of the other things in to see if it could work. And more or less it works. So I'll give it a pass, give it a large, and we move on. It's not the greatest thing I've ever seen, but good grief, is it nice to see a new movie in 2020. So I'm happy we got it. Whatever, maybe that's it. Maybe I'm having nostalgia for it to give it such a pass. But it was a lot of fun to talk about it with you as always, and it was fun to drop a little bonus, New Year's present for you here for post Christmas time for our fans to open and enjoy it. We've had a real big year here on Film Strip, and we've got another one coming up in 2021. So again, if you're wondering where the heck is my year-end podcast you've been promising, that's coming later this week. You'll hear our review of New Year's Evil that Ron and I did with Anthony and Tom from Tis the Podcast, which will be a lot of fun. And you can find all of that stuff at filmstrippodcast.com. You go there, you're going to see our link tree, which will take you to all the places you can find our stuff. Our letterbox page where we have links to all the episodes, our Anchor site where you can find all of the distribution points for the podcast, our Facebook page, our Twitter account, our Instagram, all of that available for you. Please follow us, leave a positive review, and help other people find the show. And we hope you have a wonderful year end, and let's hope for 2021 and bright things to come. So for Irina, I'm Jay. Thank you for listening to Film Strip.
Thank you for listening to Film Strip. You can find more episodes on our website, filmstrippodcast.com. The Film Strip theme music is produced and performed by Frozen Lake 121. All content used or discussed in these podcast episodes is the property of the respective owners and used under the Fair Use Act, Section 504, C2, Title 17.